The Ochoco Overlander was a challenging event, not only just from the riding perspective, but also the filmmaking perspective. In this video, I'm going to go behind the scenes and talk a little bit about the experience of filming something like the Ochoco Overlander, the camera gear I used, and kind of the specific challenges that came up. So if you want some video making nerdiness, check out this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you love bikes and bike culture and aren't into racing so much, basically the supple life, then hit that subscribe button. You have found your people. We just published our Ochoco Overlander video yesterday, and I thought it'd be fun to, while it's still fresh, talk about some of the challenges in filming something like that. So first off, I actually shot with 4 different cameras. I had 2 GoPros. One was my GoPro Hero 5 with our audio mic hack, and this is a camera I use for all the pieces to camera while riding, and actually a vast majority of the interview footage in the video. In addition, I also had a GoPro Hero Session 5, which I used to capture B-roll, some A-cam stuff, but this came out especially when it was raining and pouring, which seemed to be like most of the ride. The other on-the-bike camera was the Canon G5x, and you can see I modified it a little bit. So I've actually removed the little window thing that opens up that protects the lens, so riding naked most of the time. The idea was to use this to capture footage on the bike in a different focal length than the GoPros would provide. At least that was the intent. It didn't work out so well because it was raining, it was super cold. The first day I rode with this outside my jacket, and within the first third of that ride, the battery just died. It was just that cold. So I had to kind of rethink things on the fly, but I'll get to that later. The other camera I had was the Lumix G85 with the Rode Video Micro, which is actually on my G85 right now. And this was the camp camera. I put this in the drop bag, and I would pull this out after we got into camp and use this to pick off more B-roll and a couple of interviews. But again, this camera too suffered from the same issue with battery life. It was a real challenge. When I was editing the video, I was actually surprised at how much footage from the GoPro camera made up the video. And part of that is because since it's so small and lightweight and convenient to use, it was just the camera I turned to the most. And surprisingly, for pieces to camera where we're addressing the camera or even interviewing other folks, it just works really well. People aren't intimidated. It's easy to pull out at a second's notice. And when you're filming an event, something like the Ochoco Overlander, and you're also a participant and you don't have the luxury of driving around or having a motorbike get you to places, then you definitely want the smallest camera that you can that can capture the action. So both the GoPros work pretty well. I know a lot of you wonder if I shoot with a selfie stick, and I don't. I actually just hold the camera like this. You'll notice my grip. This hack, I love it, but this can be a loose connection. So generally whenever I'm filming, I've got my thumb on this part of the camera, making sure the cord is in, and this part, making sure that the microphone is fully plugged in. And as I film, I'll remove my finger from the microphone so it doesn't obstruct the audio, but I'll keep my thumb on the cable itself. It's kind of a hard lesson I've learned over the last 2 years of using this setup. This is probably the weak link and can get loose, especially when you're pulling it in and out of a bag or your pocket. And I would say the same thing with the GoPro Hero Session 5. I use this on occasion for some pieces to camera, especially when it was really coming down. Audio quality isn't great, but I think under those circumstances, it was doable and it fit into the film. And again, for this one too, just hand holding it, no stick or anything. I've gotten really good at when I pull this out on the camera, I'll shoot a couple of shots facing forward, then I'll flip it around in my hand and put it behind me, get some shots facing backwards, and then flip it around again in my hand and get some side shots. So really maximizing whenever these cameras come out. So let's talk about the Canon. I wish I used this camera more, but the weather conditions just didn't allow for it. The batteries on these cameras, let me show you, super small, and when they get cold, it just shuts down. I kind of freaked out the first day because my batteries were dying left and right, and I ended up putting a bunch of batteries in a plastic pouch in the pocket close to my body, warming them up and resuscitating them basically. So this camera is awesome for riding shots because it does have image stabilization. It's got a couple different focal lengths and a pretty decent microphone. There's actually this one piece of camera that Laura did that I shot on this, and I was like, whoa, totally surprised me because of the shallow depth of field and actually the decent audio. One trick I did have to employ, in particular, because I did take off the little lens protector thing, I got one of these kind of camera wraps. And the way I rode around with the Canon is actually this camera wrapped up to kind of protect the lens, but also to insulate it from the cold. And I had it around my neck, so yes, I had this big thing just dangling there, but most of the time it was under my jacket, and the idea was to keep it protected from the elements, in particular the wind and the cold, and to kind of really maximize the battery life on this guy. And it was a total pain in the butt to have to undo this camera wrap and shoot with it. That's why on the really cold days you didn't see this used very often, but I did pick off a couple of shots with it. I also use this camera a lot at camp. It's got a great zoom lens and actually shoots really well in low light. So campfire scenes, early morning scenes, this actually shot better than the Panasonic Lumix G85, mostly because the lens I have on here is a, was this 14 to 140, and it only gets up to like a 3.5 at its brightest. So not the best for low light. So when the light got low, I actually used this camera a lot more. This did come out on the sunny day, and at the actual end of the ride, I put the microphone on here and picked off some interviews and got some more B-roll with it. So it's handy for that situation, but I did not bring this on the bike at all, just because of the weather and because it's heavy. I mean, I'd much rather do a piece to camera with something small like this than hold this out all day while on the bike or walking around. This is just, I don't know. This is much better. So one big challenge that I alluded to is the cold weather. It was, my batteries were dying. So to kind of slow down this process, when we got into camp, all the cameras and all the batteries ended up in the sleeping bag. My sleeping bag was basically a mini Best Buy. So that's it for the technical stuff. But one of the big things is the mental aspect of filming, because especially in this event, I had to pull out the camera and film even when I didn't want to, even when all I wanted to do was ride or stay in the sleeping bag. So I had to do it, even though there were many times when filming was the last thing I wanted to do. One way I approached this, similar to the way I shot Dirty Kansas, was to have kind of a plan, kind of a structured intervals when I would pull out the camera and film. So yes, I would definitely pull the cameras out when something interesting was happening. Also, I knew I wanted to film at every rest stop because I knew that there would be other people there, opportunity to film other people than just Laura and I. And also at key mile markers or elevation markers, I'd pull it out and shoot at least a quick piece to camera, give a video update. I didn't use all of them. There's a ton of footage that wasn't used, but at least I would have it in the can. And then after all that, get home, download everything. I think in total there's about close to 2 hours of footage that I had to cut down to tell a story. And the video actually ended up being a lot longer than I expected. I was aiming for like that 12 to 15 minute mark, but it was an event that happened over 4 days. And I wanted to tell a little bit about each day. I watched it a couple times to make sure the pacing was okay, that there weren't too many dead spots, and that there were funny moments. I think given the circumstances, the video turned out pretty well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. It was a tougher ride to just complete, then to film, and then to edit. Lots of challenges, but I'm pretty happy with the end product. If you guys watch the channel, then you know our tone isn't super epic adventurer. I definitely wanted moments of levity. So, telling jokes or setting up so I knew that people would respond in a funny way, or just adding a little bit to the conversation to add that bit of humor. But it's interesting reading the situation, knowing when something interesting is going to happen, leading someone to come to a funny conclusion, interesting conclusion. Because as someone creating the video, yes, I want to be as hands-off, make it observational to an extent, but I also know that I need things to make the narrative make sense or be entertaining. So there were definite times when I would kind of set the situation up for a desired outcome, I would say. So I think my favorite example of this is actually probably one of the last interviews, and it's with Joe, the brewer over at Ochoco Brewing Company. I knew that I wanted to tie beer in the event, and one of the questions I had in my mind during the 3 days was, you know, okay, if you're a brewer and you're riding this, what kind of beer would you make that would best kind of capture this ride? So if this event was a beer, what kind of beer would it be? And observing Joe the last couple days, I knew he had a great sense of humor and it would be a great closer. So I waited till the last day and we chatted him up a little bit and then hit him with that question. And I think it actually turned out pretty well. So that's one of those moments where I wouldn't say it was constructed, but I definitely knew that given certain circumstances, I could get an outcome I wanted. That's one small example. There's definitely examples of that throughout the video where I kind of just prod or anticipate that something interesting is going to happen and try to capture it on film. So that's it for this video. I hope it gave you another perspective on the Ochoco Overlander video. If you haven't watched it, definitely check it out. You can see all these cameras in action. And if you guys have any other questions about the whole process, the gear, whatever, leave those in the comments below. The link to all these products are in the description below. As always, you can support the channel via the Patreon or PayPal or by buying a Supple t-shirt. Everything adds up and really makes it possible to make more of these fun travel and event videos. So definitely check out those links. And as always, keep the Supple side down.